Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Goodrich.
And I'm Brandi Gordon.
And this is The Practice of Being Human, which is a conversation between two lifelong friends who invite you on their journey of self-discovery, trial and error, and how they practice being human.
We made it. Episode 3.
Episode 3. Welcome back, Brandi. Thanks for coming back.
Welcome back, Emily. I think it's probably something to marvel at when we do make it to another episode, based on the amount of things and chaos happening in our lives, both with the children and ourselves. So each time we see each other's face, I'm like, good job.
Yeah, we did this.
You made it.
We made it. That's actually how I feel every Friday when we make it through a school week. That's the self-talk that I have with myself. It's like, good job. You made it. You packed 15 lunches this week and showed up to life. Like, good job. Good job.
Yes.
And I think it's also worth at this point, like taking a moment and saying with like enormous gratitude and full hearts, thank you to the humans who have watched and listened and like blows our minds and reached out and have said through text or calls or on our Instagram page, just like the most lovely and supportive things beyond what we could have imagined.
Yes.
And really is we're like, okay, well, we'll show up and try again. Like,
apparently people are hearing it, which it's not just my mom that said good job.
Yeah, which we love that Barbara, though, did listen and said good job. Like, that made us feel good. But, and the fact, like, our whole goal with this is to build a community.
Right.
And to say, like, you're not alone.
Yeah.
This is tough stuff. This is amazing and rewarding, but it's messy and complicated. And we will openly share that with you. And thank you for reaching out to us and sharing back. Like, our whole thing has been to create a space where people feel welcome to show up to.
Right.
Which I think is lovely because that's what we're going to dive into this week.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And also just like coming off of last week and really, I think in our intention of building this community and creating space and inviting others into our trial and error and our life circumstances and what's going on, I want to honor both you and I in this idea of like, we did share something that was really vulnerable. And I think I said to you after I listened to it back, like, I think I had an out of body experience. Like, I don't actually remember what we said. And then to listen to it again, sort of from the lens of someone else listening, I was like, oh, that was a lot.
That was big.
That was a lot.
Yeah, that was a lot. So thank you, everyone, for holding space for us. Well, we, for the first time ever publicly in any forum, said, like, this is where it fell apart. This is where we had to sit and go into a depth that we have never done previously. And I think that for us, when you have like these massive experiences that push you and challenge you to go to a depth you haven't gone to before, if you lean into that, a lot of really beautiful things happen. And I think for both of us, what was lovely that it happened this way was we kind of each sat in the rubble afterwards, right? Where you're like, okay, it fell down. Like it greatly felt the facades, the stories I was telling myself.
Yeah, the almost, and even prior to that point, the idea of all the reasons we anticipated like not making that decision up to that point, some came true, some didn't, but it was being able to sit and hold space and really think and say, okay, all those fears that were preventing us from making those choices, I'm still okay. Like,
I'm still okay.
Yeah. And like for you on the company side, the company is still okay. It actually may be in a better spot. For me, my kids are okay. In fact, they and me might be better because they're living in a space of authenticity, and also seeing two mommies that are struggling with the separation, but really loving the weight off the shoulders and realizing we're all going to be okay. And two loving homes is better than one like falling home or dark home?
I think you're given an opportunity to sit with each piece and examine the rubble around you and hold it with compassion and light and love.
Yes.
And say, there's so many questions in the aftermath. And for us, I think the themes were like, how did I get here? Where did I step out of myself? Where did I start to believe that suppressing and repressing was the best thing? When did I start to craft a story that was so far from my heart? And
yes,
when did I stop showing up for myself?
Yep.
And who and how do I want to come into the world as? When I show up now, what is the truest, most authentic version of myself? And how do I find my way back home?
Right.
And so what we're going to chat about today, because this will be the bulk of what we want to talk about moving forward, is what does it look like to show up for oneself? And what does that then mean to show up in the world?
Right.
And what are the tools and what does that journey back inward look like to show up for yourself?
Right. And how does recognizing that we spoke a truth, we couldn't pack it back in, we are recognizing it's out there, we've made a choice, we're on a different path, but how do we look before that decision and say, what things did I do? Not putting it on anyone else. It wasn't about anybody else. At the end of the day, we made choices and we abandoned ourselves and we did things and we followed patterns and we did all the things that led us to continuously abandon ourselves, which put another brick on the wall that we were creating of resentment, which made us cross boundaries, which added another brick to the wall. Like, we were doing all these things that were really offending our own boundaries. And it was on us. We couldn't, at the end of the day, we can't blame the other participating parties for anything. It was on us. So we really, I think we both challenged each other in the aftermath to say, like, what things did we do here before the decision? And let's not repeat patterns, or if we do, let's shorten the time that we recognize it's happening and change the behavior. So what things do we need to sit with to be able to move forward and live authentically again, versus coming into a space and choosing to make decisions for other people instead of ourselves and our families?
Yes.
And for our own highest good.
Yes. And then in that journey and in those questions and in that space of determining what it really means to show up and live authentically,
right,
I can then engage in a relationship with myself that is built on intimacy, vulnerability, and trust. And then in turn, I can actually engage with the world or those who have a seat at my table or come into my space with intimacy, vulnerability, and trust, and defining what that actually means.
Right. Yes. And how do we, first and foremost, build those ideas internally?
Yes.
And really show up for ourselves first.
Yes.
And then be able to say, at what capacity can I give outside of myself in those ways?
Yes. And I think we are programmed and we are taught our entire lives to do that in the reverse.
Yes.
I will show up, I will give, I will be, I will do, I will provide for everyone around. And then if there is anything in the tank left over, I will address myself.
Right.
And I think this was a big, big, big shift to say, no, I have to meet myself in this space first. And it's a long road. I would be lying if I said that, like, oh, both of us immediately jumped into that space with compassion, love, and support. There is a lot of layers first where you have to go through. Like there is self-judgment. There is a lack of trust. There is seeing these dark spots and these dark moments as darkness.
Right.
And you actually have to travel to a journey of circling back to saying, no, that these spots, this moments where I stepped outside, I can hold that with compassion, light, and love, and then see the wholeness.
Right.
So to me, showing up, and we can each have a definition, but showing up for myself means I am bringing every single piece of myself.
Right. Yeah. And I remember sitting with you in this notion of showing up, because in your moments of clarity and in your moments of really examining what had happened, I remember you saying to me, like, everything was a piece of a pie. Like I went to work. I went to work and I was a businesswoman. I went home and I was a mother. I went out with my husband and I was a wife. I was with my family. I was a daughter, so there was very segmented piece. I don't know that I do that as much as you had. I think I work in a different way, and we can address that a little bit, but you were very like, like, yes. I forgot. I'm watching myself on a video. I'm like doing a little pie dance over here, but yes, it's pieces of your pie that you would show up.
Never let them bleed together.
Never. Because for you also, you had been conditioned to believe that you were supposed to do it that way, that business couldn't meld with life. That was not.
It especially couldn't meld with motherhood.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think for each of my pieces of my pie, there was a hat and a role that I played, also based on who needed what in those pieces,
right?
Who was providing or giving to in those segments, and what needed to be abandoned or left behind because either I was denying it, it was a truth I didn't want to listen to, or I didn't think it was appropriate to bring into that space.
Right.
And so for me and my journey, it was, yes, there are roles that I play throughout the day, and there are places and spaces that I will journey into, but all of me arrives in each piece.
Yes.
And with love and compassion and authenticity, whoever is in front of me is I've just, I'm shifted that mentality to say, I'm going to show up wholly and authentically, and you can accept that or not accept that. And that is your space.
Right.
But I will no longer be denying pieces of myself when I show up.
Right. And it isn't, I think one thing that this is an area of growth for me and something that I think sort of worked on, but this idea of it's not my responsibility to worry about how they're going to respond to me showing up as myself. Yes. Like I can no longer hold the responsibility of not caring because I want to be compassionate, but I can no longer use my energy or my brain space or the things that I have towards myself on them and worrying about how they're going to receive and perceive maybe this new version of myself, but more importantly, like just me in general. If you can't handle the person showing up in front of you, then maybe you're not the right person to have in my space.
Yes. Yes. And the truthfully too, for me, the space, the pieces I wasn't bringing and the places that I was denying was more of the discomfort. Like I think I've always viewed myself as, and we'll get into this further with Enneagrams, as like the camp director or the person who was, bringing the optimism and bringing the light and bringing the energy. And where I had to venture to was, well, I can't deny the pieces of myself that can show up and vulnerably tell someone in a loving, intimate, trusting relationship, I'm not okay today.
Right.
Today, this feels hard.
Right.
I don't 100% know my opinion on that. Or I think the hardest thing in this journey was sitting with grief or sitting with my heart hurts.
Yeah.
And I can't pretend it doesn't.
Right.
I can't abandon those pieces and pretend like that spectrum of emotion doesn't exist.
Right.
Every emotion is valid, and every piece of me that I have viewed as part of my past that was a struggle is actually beautiful and brought me to where I am.
Right.
And so I had to actually spend some time, and I'm still in that season of I'm getting to know myself.
Mm.
And I'm getting to know the pieces that I denied for so long, and to say each make up my pie.
Right.
And each show up, and each are a layer of trust and intimacy and vulnerability that makes each of us so complex and so lovely.
Right. The compassion that you're affording yourself has been huge, I think, in being able to say, I acted in this way. It was not okay, but I did it not as an excuse. These are the reasons I did it. I'm aware of those. I can make amends. I can offer support. I can say, this is why this happened. But at the end of the day, like, we did have moments where like, oh, I didn't like that version of myself. I'm not okay with that Emily that did that, but I'm going to work to forgive myself and to offer myself grace. I think in any and all of this, there's such a layer of grace that we've really had to like own and sit with and say like, yes, I did make mistakes, and yes, that was who I am, but I don't want to be that person anymore.
Yes. And I think for me, I have started to sit with, there's like a discomfort. There's not a joy around some of the actions or the behaviors from the past, but recognizing and the approaching it as that I was operating from a space that was not true or authentic to who I am.
Right.
I behaved in a way that was not authentic, and I was not showing up for myself in those moments. Instead, right. I was operating from a space of abandonment.
Yes.
And as a result, I did not show up in a way that felt true to me.
Right.
And so how do you recognize, instead of trying to even deny moments and say like, oh, I have to separate myself from that event. It's sitting with it and saying, how did I not show up authentically in those moments? How can I make amends for that behavior? And how can I practice doing better next time?
Right.
And so I think the first big bulk is just, how do I show up and practice for myself? How do I show up for myself in big moments and small moments?
Right. Because at the end of the day, especially in the early parts of us recognizing all those things, like we couldn't look too big picture. I think you probably more so than me, you had to decide what angle the business was going to go. So you had to make big decisions and move and do those things. But we literally were just like, again, we're stealing from Glennon Doyle here, but like, we just need to make the next right decision.
Yes. Like, I still say that to date. Like, okay, what's the next right thing? What's
the next right thing that we have to make? And in that decision making, are we doing it for ourselves or for someone else? And again, we're going to hop into Enneagrams next week, and you'll understand Emily is a 7 and me as a 2. But that is probably my Achilles crutch. Like, it really is just this space of like, how do I think of me first and then everyone else? And that isn't easy. And I would say, like, for me, showing up for myself is often just taking a breath and just really saying, am I doing this for someone else, or am I making this decision for myself and my family? And I am continuously getting my butt kicked by this. Like, it is a continual muscle that it is weak and unpracticed. And it is, when we say practicing, the practice of being human, like, I have to practice flexing this muscle. Like, it is not a natural, for me, showing up for everyone outside of me is where I have lived for almost 39 years. Am I turning 39? You just turned 39.
I think after 39 though, we can just forget and ballpark it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We're just like a few decades in. We're just going to like say we're a couple decades old.
Yes. I I appreciate that. I think that the common theme though, so it doesn't matter what Enneagram number you are, it doesn't matter if you're man or woman, whatever. The theme is you can list your reasons that you were showing up externally or seeking validation externally, which is I don't want to disappoint someone. I have to provide. I have responsibility. I don't want to make someone unhappy. I don't like conflict. I don't want to rock the boat. I mean, you name it. I think we all have a story we tell ourselves why we are acting externally before we listen to ourselves. And I think that is a common way we are all raised or all programmed to operate in the world. Right. And where the big shift happens is when you stop to say, I have to listen to myself. And when I operate from that space, it is not always the easiest decision. It is not always the fastest route, but it is the truest option. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, it is actually to the benefit of everyone else around me.
Right.
Brene Brown talks about integrity, which I think is a really important concept. And when she defines integrity is choosing what's right over what's fast and easy. So when you operate from a space of integrity, you choose the right thing for yourself, you will never disappoint, upset, those around you. And if you do, I would challenge that it might not be a truly authentic relationship.
Right. Yeah. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one's watching either. Right. Yeah. We make so many decisions that people see outwardly, but like it's in those small, intimate moments. And I think we should address intimacy a little bit, but like it's in those small moments when it's quiet and you're saying to yourself, like, what is right for me? How do I show up tomorrow for myself? How do I show up in this moment for myself? And it's those small moments where you're being and showing integrity to you rather to everyone else. Like, it's really easy to say, like, I do the right things, like with all those people around me, like I'm good. But like, what about yourself? And I think it's a daily work in progress.
Yes.
I fall short in that and often.
But there's an awareness around it, which I think makes you 90% ahead of the game, right? When you start to have an awareness and you're flooding energy to these areas.
Right.
And you all of a sudden know, like, I know when I'm operating from a space of integrity or when I'm not listening to myself or when I just couldn't show up in that moment, right? Yeah. I think that's what's different than just saying, I am going to go through the motions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that big shift was for both of us, is in saying, like, I can't just go through the motions anymore. Right. I may be slowly dying inside.
Right.
My light is dimming every day when I'm just going through motions.
Yeah.
And so while these concepts that we started to sit with, like showing up and integrity and intimacy and vulnerability, are things that we will spend the rest of our lives practicing, they are in my pie now.
Right.
And that is, at least I know I'm headed, I got on the right train, right? Like, I know, okay, I know where I'm headed. And so I think with showing up for yourself, you have to start to build trust yourself and intimacy with yourself and vulnerability with yourself. And then you can start to look at the relationships around you and start to say, how do I show up? I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and so she does a whole TED Talk and reference.
Who isn't a big Brene Brown? Like, have we met a human that's like, she's full of it?
She is off her rocker. No, she's lovely, and she does a TED Talk, which I highly recommend. That really talks about showing up. She writes a dozen books about it, and then she references a Teddy Roosevelt quote. I will share it on our Instagram page this week. And I like the twist of it's the woman in the arena, which is like, I am going to show up in this arena. I am going to show up and I am going to bare myself and do the work and take the leaps despite the fear.
Right.
Stand in vulnerability and be the best version of myself.
Yeah. And how powerful.
Yes.
Like, yeah, go ahead.
If you can't even step into the arena, I cannot welcome your feedback on the work I'm doing inside of it.
Right.
Because it is not, I love it. It's like, it is not for the weak of heart.
No.
It is messy and it is sweaty and itchy and uncomfortable, but it is doing the work. And in that space, how do I build these relationships where, like, once again, if I'm not being intimate and vulnerable with myself, like Brandi, you and I, for the longest time, I had put up a facade of this life I thought I was living, or I was trying to present that I was living. And I knew it was not full and it was not authentic. And I was keeping the secrets from you. And then in turn, how do we really build a relationship of trust and vulnerability? Because I've been keeping my authentic self out of fear.
Right. And I think it's important to recognize the definition of vulnerability and knowing that really it's a way for someone to know you or for you to let them in and to really trust that they're not going to use that against you.
Yes. And with that, so we're going to also borrow from Brene Brown. So she quotes Charles Feldman, and it says that he says trust is choosing to make something that is important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Vulnerability with another person is just saying, like, here are all of the ways that you could potentially stick it to my heart. Like, really say, these are the ways that these are my biggest fears. These are my core things that, like, really at the end of the day, like, you could use against me, and trusting that other person isn't going to use those against you.
Yep.
Right. And from there, also recognizing you and I stopped being vulnerable with certain humans in our lives because they did use it against us.
Yes. Yes. The definition for distrust is what I have chosen to share with you that is important to me is not safe with you.
Not safe any longer. But let's internally focus for 1 second on this idea. You talk a lot about, like, trusting ourselves again, right? Because we chose people or things or places or ways not authentic to ourselves, we brought people and ideas and surroundings and choices into our circle that allowed us to make inauthentic decisions or to build resentment or to just be in a bad place. And then on the outside of it and the other side of it to say, can I trust myself again? Like, can I be vulnerable with another human? Like, do I have the capacity to say, like, oh no, I can make good choices? Like, I trust myself to find the next person. I know for me, like, getting into another relationship after the breakup, like, really examining it and really saying, like, am I making a good choice? Am I living an authentic version of myself? Am I just repeating a pattern? Do I trust myself in this decision-making? Because it's so easy to blame someone else.
Yeah.
But really at the end of the day, like, can I trust myself again to be vulnerable with someone again? Because I believe that I've picked a human that deserves that vulnerability or that intimacy.
Has earned.
Right, and we can
relationship as a slow and steady build, right?
Right. Yeah, because it isn't. We talked about this last week. So I believe that, or the week before we talked about, but showing up for someone else is something that it isn't a one-time thing.
No.
Like, you could have a car crash and your friend could meet you at the scene of the accident and help. But it's not those people that we're saying are showing up. You and I believe that you think I consistently show up. I show up when the chips are down. I show up when the chips are all on your side. It's small moments of showing up of like in crisis, not in crisis, in small moments where it's like, my son just did X, Y, and Z. Awesome. I'll be there in a few minutes. Let's just sit in the same room. It doesn't matter. And if I can't show up, I communicate why I can't be there. And that's okay because I've earned that grace to say, Brandi can't show up right now, but she will show up later.
99 times before this, she has. It
Right.
makes reliability, consistency, and accountability.
Right. That's huge.
Saying what you're gonna do, but doing.
Yeah.
And not just
right. Yeah, for sure. I came across something that talks a little bit about intimacy, and I want to just talk about, there's kind of 4 ideas of intimacy. And last week or the week before, in week 1, we talked about the 3 different types of friendship, but I want to talk a little bit about the 4 ways of intimacy. So there's experiential intimacy, which means my son and I are building a train together. We get into a rhythm. The experience we're creating is a rhythm. Or Emily, you have a business person, you're in a flow with them on this project that you're working on. It's an experience that you have this intimacy. Then there's an emotional intimacy where we're talking about you feel safe to share feelings and trust that it's not going to be used against you. Okay. And I would argue that I struggled with that, or I do struggle with that when I don't feel safe, or when it's proven to me when I have been outwardly gave in that way, it was either used against me or it was just, you're not important. My needs are more important. So I think that's another level. The next is this intellectual intimacy, which means you feel comfortable sharing ideas and opinions, even if the person doesn't agree. So I would say that in the last year of COVID and politics and all the things, this is where around us is probably falling. No one feels safe to share an idea about politics, about a vaccine, about COVID, where we actually trust that I can say these things to you, even if you're on the flip side of it. That it's so polarized right now that that's not possible. And I think it is probably where we're breaking down as a whole community, is that there isn't this way to talk about intellectual things or ideas that differ from someone else's. Okay. And then the last idea is this, obviously, sexual intimacy. And I think when you say intimacy, 9 times out of 10, someone goes to this idea of a sexual intimacy. So it's usually referring to that. But I would argue that you can engage in sexual activities with someone and not be intimate, that you can just be going through the motions, or it can be a carnal need or any of those things. But it's really in those moments of connection and like being with your partner in a way that they have expressed that they want to be engaged in those ways. So again, I think there's different kinds of intimacy, and it's really fascinating to me to think about those on different levels and with different humans in my life and say, oh, I have that with this person, but I don't with another. And to sit and say, like, why? Like, why don't I feel comfortable sharing this random idea with this person? Oh, because it's been proven that in those moments, they blow back up at me, or they don't value, or they don't hear what I have to say in those moments. So I'm not going to trust them to say those things. I'm going to probably talk to someone who does agree with me. And then we're not growing or learning or stretching. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
I love all of this. I just think it's so profound. I love the business side of it. I think that is a big one of like, for me, I have always come from a space of like large, quick convictions.
Yep.
No, this is my idea. This is how I feel. This is what I think. And I think in this growth, in this space, when it comes to ideas, ways to live life, big, profound, complex, layered ideas, I've now tried to gravitate to a space of my immediate reaction is maybe this doesn't sit right with me.
Right.
I don't have all the information, so I have to get back to you. or I don't know how I feel. And that is totally new for me to say, like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that big idea or how I feel about this. So I think that is a new layer of growth and getting to know myself and vulnerability. I think in each of these categories too, it's an evaluation, a good space or a temperature gauge to say, like, how am I showing up in each of those categories? How am I bringing myself to that space? How am I allowing people to see me once again, right? Because can true intimacy be accomplished if I'm not willing to be vulnerable? No, right?
Well, it's this idea of just going through the motions, right? Like, I can be a body in the room. I can hold space, and I am the queen of this. Put me in a room with complete strangers, and I will know everything about everyone in the room. I will know who got in a fight with their partner before they got to the room. I will know who just lost a business deal. I'll know who doesn't want to be there and they'd rather just be on their couch. Like, I will know intimately where people are as they're showing up. But I would bet a guess 8 times out of 10, nobody in the room is going to know about me.
No. Or they're going to know what you are allowing them or what you want them to perceive and how you want to come across.
Right. And I think that's the point of of all of this is that when I broke down, when I literally was under the rubble, I crawled my way out. And while I crawled my way out, I was like, I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to be the person that's in the room just showing up for everyone else and saying, let me break your walls down. Just ignore the 20-foot wall that's in front of me. I'm going to stand on top of and hear and listen to you, but you're not going to know why I'm standing on it.
Also, then the lack of trust or almost the betrayal these other people must feel when they realize I've only let you come so far with me. I've let you think you've come all the way,
right?
But you don't actually know me,
right? But why did we do that? And that's something
perceived. If I let you know it all, you would not be here. You would not feel the same way about me. You would not afford me the grace and compassion that I have afforded you.
Right. And for you, it was like, if I'm not the big person in the room, if I'm not the one driving the fun, if I'm not being the camp director, then you're not going to like me. And for me, it was, if I don't give, if I'm not giving to you and I'm not showing up for you, then you clearly aren't going to need me. And I think that it'll be huge for next week, but if I'm not needed, do you even want me here? Like, that feels awful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when you also sit in a space where you're like, hey, I don't know myself.
Right.
I have not allowed myself to deeply have the most important intimate relationship you can have with myself. Right. And then in turn, I have never let anyone else really know me. That is such an unfortunate way to move through the world, because the depth and because what we are all doing, right? When you are showing up for yourself, when you are showing up for others, when you live in that space, the connection that you have to yourself and others is truly the most rewarding and beautiful thing, because that is what we are here to do.
Right.
Create, connect, love, inspire, and to really feel the purity of those emotions takes an intimacy and vulnerability and a knowing.
Right.
Which I believe we will practice for the rest of our lives. And what a gift to say, like, okay, I think I understand what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I don't have it all. I don't have all the pieces. This will change. But I do think a big chunk of what we're doing here is exploring the complexity of human dynamic and connection and love.
Yeah. And choosing something different. Like, really saying, I don't want to be that version of myself. I'm going to show up fully, not only to support you and the space I'm holding, but trusting that you can do the same for me, and choosing humans in our community and our space and a seat at our table that are deserving of that version of ourselves. Yes. And saying like, you're important enough to get all of me.
And I am important enough to honor each piece of me.
Yes.
And all I think we can ask of each other once again is just come into this room.
Right.
Meet me in the center and bring all of your pieces.
Yeah.
And I will bring all of mine, and the depth that we can go to together when we meet in that space, in the center of that room,
is gorgeous.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. And Emily, when your chips are down and you need to meet, and I need to meet you 80% of the room because all you've got is 20, we have built a relationship of trust and intimacy, and we've proven to one another that that's okay, as long as it's sometimes and not all the time. That you're going to communicate when you can't meet me at 50, and I'm going to say, I've got a little more to give today. Let me meet you where you are, and then dang it, I'm going to learn how to tell you when I need something, because that's my downfall too, is I'm not able to say and communicate what I need. But I'm learning that, hey, I don't have 50% today. I don't have 80 that you needed me yesterday. I'm actually at the 20. Come to my side of the room today because I need you.
Yes. And I think that as we've grown and as we've evolved to that space, to even start a conversation and just say like, hey, heads up, I need to tell you where I am today.
Right. My favorite messages in text message from you is, hey, my weather system is, and this is where I get, right?
Yeah.
And my answer is like, I've got an umbrella.
Yep.
And you tell me where you want me to show up, and I'll either sit in that rainstorm with you, or we can talk later. You don't have to pretend to be in a different weather system today just so that I can hear you. You know what I mean?
Yep. And I think that the way that the relationships in our lives have evolved from having to show up a few years ago and saying like, honestly, like, hey, I was not being truthful. I would like to just try to bring each piece and show you each piece of myself, and start to get to really know each other to where they are today has been the most amazing evolution, and really incredibly fulfilling.
Yeah. And again, like I circle back to confidently and really with so much love for you, like this area of growth for you, for me to watch, is magic, because it is so beautiful to see this person that let no one in all of a sudden open the floodgates and dig and come out of that trench and say like, I'm a whole, with or without your opinion. Here I am. Watch me roar. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's magic. It's lovely to see the evolution in this space specifically for you, and how I believe you asked others to show up for you without really, it's not that you didn't show up for people. It was just in a way that was on your terms. And now it's so different. It's this way of saying like, I'm showing up fully in my full version. Here I am. I'm here for you as you're here for me. And as long as you meet me in the middle, or try really hard to meet me in the middle, this relationship will be mutually beneficial for everyone involved.
Thank you. I love that. And I think likewise for you with your area, it has been, I think I had to sit down the first time when you were like, this is what I need.
Yeah.
I listened to myself, and I think this is something I've identified that I need.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask for that. And it's not unfair, and it's not selfish, and it's not wrong to express that in an intimate relationship at a high level. Here are some of the things that I would need in that space. And it was so beautiful because you had to risk, would I lose this person? What, like there's so much uncertainty for you in that space. And it was, I think you were greeted by a bunch of people who were like, of course, let me write this down. I will save this piece of knowledge you've given me of a need. Like I've tried to deduct what you may need, right? But to actually have you go into a space where you're owning, like, this is what I may need. And also to say, I'm really exhausted and I just need to go take care of myself first. And then I can return to this space and then
Right.
like, hats off to you. That's lovely. Like, do
Yeah.
what you need to do.
I think your pointing out of the tribe that greeted me in that quest was so lovely. When I'd made the decision and I had to lean on my tribe of humans to get me through, here's the tears, say episode 3. Like, I was greeted with such open arms. And I think it felt like to me, like I had given to those. And I truly don't think it was because I gave to them that they gave back. It was just, I have these amazing humans in my life that were willing to give an open arm, say to me, like, you're okay. We've got you. It's okay. And in fact, I don't even need it in return, right? Like, it's just, this is when you give and expect in return, that's an investment, right? Versus when I give and don't expect anything back, that's love. And I was so loved, like so loved. And I can't even, if you're listening, thank you to those that opened their everything to me and ushered me into this space of being able to be vulnerable and intimate and say, like, oh my God, I need you. And you just to say, of course.
Why wouldn't we be there?
Yeah.
For both of us, it was almost too like we didn't give credit where credit was due.
Right.
Because when I too finally sat down and said, like, here are the pieces of me that I perceive to be flawed and broken and damaged and not who you think I am.
Right.
I was in turn greeted with, that is why you are strong and we respect you and you lead so well, is because of the distance you have gone.
Right.
And who you have become, not like despite these things.
Right.
And so it was really, really magical to see the people on the other side waiting for both of us with open arms.
Right. Yeah.
And for us, that is what we mean, and the context behind showing up and where we each had to start this journey is to really deeply dive in and say, where am I not showing up for myself? And how do I want to show up in the world and in relationships and in the roles I'm playing? And from there, what are the tools I need to start to find my way back to myself?
Which is where we will go next week with our Enneagrams and all of that truth sitting. And yes. I'm looking forward to sharing that messiness with all of you guys next week.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Everyone, thanks for listening.
Bye.